so on Resurrection Sunday, I came to announce that when the forces of death declare that it is the end, that Jesus victoriously responds, that the situation is to be continued. And therefore, we might live in a Good Friday world, but we walk by a resurrection faith. We walk by faith and not by sight. You see, a Good Friday world is a world full of suffering, full of questioning God about what's happening in my life. It's a world that is full of unfairness and trouble and mistakes and hurts and losses and grief. And the first point I need for you to understand is that we do live in a Good Friday world. We live in a land where natural disasters bring destruction on the just and the unjust. Our country is experiencing a crisis of an order that has not been seen in many decades, one where strife and moral collapse and economic depression and deep political division have left many people in deep despondency as well as in a very angry mood. Folk are just mad and don't know why they're mad. Mad because somebody's playing their music in their car too loud, and so they pull out a gun and murder somebody, just mad for no reason. The forces of death, the pain and the grief and the confusion about what God is doing in the midst of senseless suffering darken the landscape of many of our communities. The forces of death seem to have the last word, particularly where black youth are victims of violence. So you see, sisters and brothers, I presided over or participated in too many funerals of young men whose lives were aborted by gunfire, not on some foreign battlefield, but right here in Springfield on their home turf in the community where their parents raised them. And not too long ago, I led a prayer vigil in March against violence in a community dominated by the forces of death. We marched from Dunbar down State Street, up Hancock, and across Union, and in just that small portion of the city, many of the murders and shootings that took place last year took place within the proximity of that particular area, right around schools, churches, community centers, pharmacies, and homes where families live, work, and play. We live in a Good Friday world where the forces of death are running rampant. And then in addition to youth violence, there's domestic violence. And it sits as an elephant in the room of the African American community. It sits as the elephant in the room, sisters and brothers, even of the church community. It has resulted in the forces of death claiming the lives of many whose silent screams were heard too late. Families that are devastated, children that are emotionally confused and broken, and friends that are consumed by guilt and regret when the worst happens and a victim of domestic violence loses their life because we sat by silently and said nothing and did nothing. On top of youth and domestic violence, we've got the prison industrial complex that consumes the lives and aborts the potential of too many of our people, and particularly too many of our young men. The forces of death manifest in injustice, and they have robbed many of our people of time and of their lives. And so the church, in the face of these Good Friday realities, must announce some kind of good news. On this resurrection day, you really didn't come here for me to give you the negative status indicators and hear all of the negative statistics. You came here dressed up in your Sunday best because you wanted to hear some good news. But how do we do this? How do we give you good news? We can't just fake it. We can't just tell people what they want to hear. We can't just do wishful thinking, and we can't pour sweet syrup and honey on blood-drenched situations. But some way, somehow, in the middle of the Good Friday tragedies of our community, we've got to help people experience the remembrance of a redemptive past and the conviction of a liberated future. The good news helps people to see tragic events through heaven's eyes. You see, before the advent of psychological sciences, before you could go see the psychiatrist or the psychologist, before you could go and get yourself some help, it was the power of the gospel that had the ability to sustain a people in the middle of tragic circumstances. You see, in the middle of slavery, they didn't go see the psychologists. Oh, come on here, somebody. When they were going through lynchings and Jim Crow, they didn't go and see the psychologists, but it was the gospel that gave them hope and that gave them good news in the middle of a Good Friday situation. So first, we've got to come to grips with the fact that we live in a Good Friday world. No one is going to make it through on flower beds of ease. No one is going to get through life without experiencing some suffering and some pain. We have to come to grips with the fact that we do live in a Good Friday world. I don't care how saved you are and how well things are going right now. I don't care what your bank account looks like right now, or what you're driving right now, or how good your health is right now. Sooner or later, you will be faced with a Good Friday situation. Yes, am I preaching to somebody?